My name is Dorothy Carter. I'm 66 years old, and for the past 10 years, my life has revolved around one person, my grandson, Ethan. When my daughter Melissa and her husband Ryan disappeared out of our lives, Ethan was only 5. They left one night with nothing more than a half-hearted promise to get settled somewhere better, and never came back. Bills piled up in the mailbox. Ethan cried himself to sleep on the couch, and I realized the little boy had nobody but me. So I became mother again, not grandmother in the cozy weekend visit sense. I packed school lunches, stayed up with fevers, scraped together money for soccer cleats, sat through parent-teacher meetings. Every time the teacher said, Ethan's mom, it meant me, even if the paperwork still listed Melissa. I kept the sewing machine humming in the back room, patching neighbors' curtains and hemming prom dresses. The money wasn't much, but it paid for groceries and the occasional birthday cake. Ethan never complained. He'd sit on the floor near my feet, building Lego towers while I stitched. I told him stories about his grandfather, how steady his hands were when he built our porch swing, how he whistled the same tune every morning until the day his heart gave out. Ethan grew up on those stories, and he grew up on me. Still, small-town folks talk. At church, whispers followed. Such a shame the parents just vanished. How long can Dorothy keep it up? She's not young anymore. I pretended not to hear, but the words stuck. Sometimes at night, lying awake, I thought, what happens when I can't keep going? What if they come back one day? One afternoon, Mrs. Carter, no relation, just a neighbor who lived across the street, brought over a basket of apples. She sat at my kitchen table, eyes sharp as ever, and said, Dorothy, you've raised that boy better than anyone. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But mark my words, if Melissa and Ryan ever stroll back, they'll try to erase what you've done. I laughed it off. They won't come back, not after 10 years. She leaned closer. Don't be so sure. People return when there's something to take. Her warning lodged itself deep inside me. By the time Ethan turned 15, he was taller than me, his voice deepening, his manners polite enough that neighbors often said, Dorothy, you did something right. He called me Grandma in public, but in the quiet of our kitchen, he sometimes slipped and said, Mom. The first time, he froze in embarrassment. I just smiled and said, I'll answer to either. That was the life I knew. Small, modest, but ours. And then everything began to shift. I still remember the night the doorbell rang. It was a Tuesday in early spring, the kind of evening when the smell of cut grass drifts through the windows and you're just settling after supper. Ethan was at the kitchen table finishing geometry homework, head bent, pencil tapping. I was rinsing dishes when the bell startled us both. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. And there they stood, Melissa and Ryan, my daughter and son-in-law, absent for a decade, faces older but eyes just as sharp. Mom, Melissa said like she'd only been gone a week. She leaned in for a hug I couldn't force my arms to return. Ethan froze at the table, pencil slipping from his fingers. His face went pale. Ryan gave a stiff smile. We thought it was time to come home, time to reconnect with our son. Those words hit me harder than any slap. Their son, the boy they'd abandoned when he was barely out of kindergarten. I stepped aside mechanically because neighbors were passing on the sidewalk and I didn't want a scene right there. They came in, bringing a gust of cold night air that turned my kitchen strange. Melissa looked around the house with disdain. Same curtains, same couch, you haven't changed a thing. I steadied my voice. Stability is what Ethan needed. He grew up here. Ethan whispered, "Hi," but didn't move toward them. Melissa crouched like she was posing for a picture. Look at you all grown, but you need real parents now, Ethan. Grandma's done her part. I felt my throat tighten. Done my part? I've raised him every day for 10 years. Ryan cut in with a dismissive chuckle. You've done fine, Dorothy, but we're back. We'll take it from here. The words dripped with casual cruelty, like I had been nothing but a placeholder, a babysitter who overstayed. Melissa's eyes flicked at me, sharp and deliberate. Honestly, you should think about resting. A place like Willow Creek Assisted Living might suit you. You don't have to worry about Ethan anymore. I gripped the counter to steady myself. The air in the room thickened, my own daughter standing in my kitchen, suggesting to my face that I was too old, too tired, too useless to matter. Ethan pushed his chair back hard enough to scrape the floor. "Grandma's not going anywhere," he said, voice shaking but clear. Melissa gave a tight smile, almost rehearsed. "We'll see about that." And with those 5 words, I knew the piece of the past decade was over. This was only the beginning. The very next evening, it all cracked open. Melissa and Ryan insisted on family dinner. I tried to keep it civil for Ethan's sake, but by the time the roast chicken hit the table, civility was gone. Melissa toyed with her fork, looking across at Ethan. "Sweetheart, you should start packing some of your things. We'll set up a proper room for you at our place." Ethan's eyes darted to mine, panicked. "I don't want to leave Grandma." I set my fork down slowly. "He has a proper room. He's lived here since he was 5. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Dorothy, you've done enough. He needs parents, not an old woman pretending." My voice rose before I could stop it. Pretending? I was the one in the hospital when he broke his arm. I was the one paying for school lunches. Where were you? Melissa's face flushed. "We had things to handle. Life isn't always simple." I leaned forward. "Life isn't simple, but you chose to walk away. Don't you dare erase what I've done." Ethan whispered, "Please stop." But Melissa pressed harder. "You've filled his head with your version of events," she snapped. "But we're back now, and things are going to change." I clenched my hands in my lap. "The only thing that's going to change is my patience. You don't get to stroll in after 10 years and push me aside." A knock on the back door interrupted us. Mrs. Carter, the neighbor, poked her head in. She often did without waiting, knowing we never minded. "Dorothy, I brought over that pie dish you loaned me." She froze when she saw Melissa and Ryan at the table. Melissa's lips curled into a smirk. "Perfect, a witness. Tell her, Mom. Tell her you can't keep up anymore. Tell her it's time you let us take over." Mrs. Carter's eyes narrowed. She looked from me to Ethan, then back to Melissa. "From what I've seen, Dorothy has been more mother than anyone. Be careful what you're trying to claim." The silence after her words was sharp enough to cut. Ryan forced a laugh. "We'll sort this out legally if we have to." Melissa stood, slamming her napkin on the table. "Grandma's reign is over. Ethan will come with us. End of discussion." But the discussion was only just beginning. It didn't take long for Melissa and Ryan to spread their version of the story. Within a week, whispers floated around town like pollen. At the grocery store, Mrs. Jenkins cornered me by the produce aisle, and I heard your daughter's back. She says you've been struggling with your health, Dorothy. Maybe it's for the best if Ethan goes with them." I gripped the handle of the cart so tight my knuckles whitened. "Struggling? I still work every day. That boy hasn't missed a meal or a class." But the rumor was already planted. Ryan had made sure of it. Ethan came home from school one afternoon, shoulders slumped. "Grandma, some kids said Mom told their parents you're too old to drive me around. They asked if I even eat real dinners." My chest ached. "What did you say?" "I told them you cook better than anyone, but—" He hesitated. "They laughed." That night, I called my friend Linda, the woman who'd stood beside me through bake sales and parent nights. I needed reassurance. Instead, her voice was cautious. "Dorothy, maybe Melissa has a point. Raising a teenager at your age isn't easy. Maybe it's time you let them step in." I swallowed hard. "Linda, you know what I've given up for Ethan. You know they abandoned him." Silence stretched on the line, then, "People can change. Maybe you should let them try." The betrayal stung more than Melissa's words ever could. My closest ally was wavering, already leaning toward the shiny promises of Ryan's money and Melissa's charm. At church that Sunday, Melissa sat proudly in the pew ahead of me, arm around Ethan like she had never left. When service ended, she whispered loudly enough for half the congregation to hear, "Ethan will be moving in with us soon. Mom needs to rest." Eyes turned toward me, some pitying, some skeptical. I felt the heat of humiliation rise up my neck. Ethan looked at me, pleading silently, but I could only grip his hand and walk out without a word. By evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table. Ethan had gone to bed early, worn out from the whispers at school. The house felt colder, smaller. Even the sewing machine in the corner seemed to have fallen silent. 10 years of sacrifice, of scraped meals and sleepless nights were being erased in a matter of days. And for the first time since they left Ethan with me, I felt truly alone. And the worst was still to come. The breaking point came at a family gathering Melissa arranged. She called it a welcome back dinner, inviting relatives I hadn't seen in years. Out of obligation and to keep an eye on Ethan, I agreed to attend. The moment I stepped into the rented banquet hall, I knew I had walked into an ambush. Melissa swept across the room in a new dress, Ryan at her side, grinning like conquering heroes. Tables were decorated. A banner stretched across the wall. Family together again. No mention of me. I sat with Ethan near the end of a long table. He clutched my hand under the cloth, eyes darting nervously. Midway through the evening, after the clinking of glasses and a parade of toasts, Melissa tapped her spoon against her glass. "Everyone, I have an announcement." The chatter died down. She stood, smiling wide. "As you all know, Ryan and I have returned to take care of our son. It's been too long, but we're ready to give him the life he deserves. And after much discussion, we've also decided it's best for Mom," she glanced at me, "to settle somewhere safe. We've looked into Willow Creek Assisted Living. It will take the burden off her shoulders and let her finally relax." Gasps, murmurs. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. My face burned. I rose slowly. "I am not moving into any home. I've been raising Ethan, your son, while you were gone." Ryan's voice sliced through. "Dorothy, no one is questioning your effort, but you're not getting younger. It's irresponsible to keep clinging to a role you can't handle." A cousin chuckled under his breath. Someone whispered, "Maybe it's for the best." Ethan jumped up. "Grandma's fine. She's the only one who's ever been there for me." Melissa laid a hand on his shoulder, forcing him back into his seat. "Sweetheart, you don't have to defend her. You'll understand when you're older." The humiliation was complete. In front of family, neighbors, and church friends, my daughter had declared me useless, unfit, unwanted. My years of sacrifice reduced to a pitying punchline. I sank back down, the room spinning. For the first time, I wondered if they were right. If maybe I was too old, if maybe everything I'd built could crumble in an instant. That night, after the dinner, I sat in my car in the dark parking lot long after everyone had left. Ethan curled against me, silent. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. It was the lowest I had ever fallen. The night after that dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, humiliation replaying in my mind like a cruel loop. Melissa's smile, Ryan's smug tone, the whispers of relatives. Willow Creek Assisted Living. The words dug into me like barbed wire. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock. Ethan slipped into my room, holding something against his chest. "Grandma," he whispered, "I want you to have this." He handed me a worn leather notebook, edges frayed, pages bent from years of use. I frowned. "What's this, sweetheart?" "It's mine. I started it when I was little. Mrs. Clark at school told us to keep a journal. I wrote down everything. Birthdays, Christmases, the time you fixed my science project, even when you sat with me all night when I was sick." I opened it. His handwriting changed over the years, from messy block letters to the sharper strokes of a teenager. Entry after entry mentioned me. Grandma packed my lunch with an extra cookie. Grandma sat through the rain at my soccer game. Grandma told me stories about Grandpa until I fell asleep. Tears blurred the words. Ethan's voice shook. "They can say whatever they want, but you're the one who raised me. You're my real parent. I don't care what anyone else thinks." I closed the book and held it to my chest. For the first time in days, the crushing weight on my shoulders lifted. Melissa and Ryan could smear my name, turn neighbors against me, even try to erase me, but they couldn't rewrite Ethan's memories. They couldn't change the truth carved into his heart. I kissed his forehead. "Thank you, Ethan. This means more than you know." He nodded, eyes shining. "We'll fight them together, Grandma. I'm not letting them take me away." When he left the room, I sat in the dark with the journal open on my lap. Each page was proof of years no one could steal. And in that quiet moment, I felt something ignite inside me, a steadiness I hadn't known in years. I whispered into the silence, "They want a fight? Then they'll get one." This was no longer about surviving humiliation, it was about reclaiming dignity. I would not be cast aside, not without showing them who I really was. The next morning, I brewed a pot of strong coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Ethan's journal spread open like a blueprint. Every entry was a brick in the wall of truth. But bricks alone don't build a house, you need mortar to hold them together. I needed a plan. I pulled out a notepad, my hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. Step 1. Secure the legal ground. Melissa and Ryan could talk all they wanted, but the law had recognized me as Ethan's guardian for a decade. I still had the court papers. I would visit Mr. Hale, the local attorney, to ensure those documents were airtight. Step 2. Gather witnesses. Rumors were their weapon. Facts would be mine. Mrs. Carter had heard their words in my kitchen. Ethan's teachers knew who attended every meeting. Our pastor had seen me alone at every Sunday service with Ethan by my side. I would ask them to speak truth if it came to that. Step 3. Control the setting. They humiliated me in public. I would return the blow the same way, not with malice, but with truth so undeniable it could not be spun. A town that loved gossip would become the stage where I drew the line. Step 4. Give Ethan a voice. They treated him like property, a prize to be claimed. But Ethan was old enough to speak for himself. If he wanted to stand beside me, his words would cut deeper than mine ever could. As I scribbled these steps, Ethan shuffled into the kitchen, hair messy, rubbing his eyes. "Planning something, Grandma?" I smiled, sliding the notepad toward him. "I'm tired of letting them tell our story. It's time we tell it ourselves." He read the list, then looked at me with a grin. "I'm in, whatever you need me to do." I felt a surge of pride. He wasn't a child anymore. He was my partner in this fight. That afternoon, I called Mr. Hale's office and set an appointment. I spent the evening digging through old boxes, pulling out legal papers, school forms, even photographs of birthdays and graduations. Proof of a decade that Melissa and Ryan had forfeited. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to build a case so strong that when the truth came out, no one in town would ever look at me with pity again. By the time I tucked Ethan into bed, my fear had hardened into resolve. The next move would be mine. 2 days later, I walked into Mr. Hale's law office with a folder so thick it barely closed. Every legal paper since 2013 was in there: court guardianship, school registration forms, doctor's notes with my signature. Mr. Hale adjusted his glasses as he flipped through. "Dorothy, this is solid. You've been Ethan's guardian longer than most marriages last. If Melissa and Ryan want to challenge this, they'll have a hard climb." "Good," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. "But legal papers alone won't stop them. They've already poisoned half the town with their lies." He nodded slowly. "Then you need to do what they did, control the narrative. But with facts." That afternoon, I made a decision. I walked down to the community hall on Main Street, a place that hosted everything from graduation parties to quilting fairs. The manager, a kind man named Paul, raised his eyebrows when I asked about renting it for the following Saturday. "Big event, Dorothy?" I smiled tightly. "Yes, a celebration for Ethan. He won a small scholarship at school. I want folks to hear about it." Paul grinned. "Well, that's wonderful. I'll reserve the hall for you." As I signed the rental form, a strange calm washed over me. I wasn't just booking a room, I was setting a stage. That night, Ethan watched me pin the receipt to our fridge. "What's the plan, Grandma?" I tapped the paper. "We'll invite everyone, family, neighbors, church friends. They think they can erase the last 10 years? Let's show them who really raised you." Ethan's grin was fierce, "And I'll tell them myself." I pulled him into a hug. "That's my boy." For the rest of the week, I prepared. I baked pies and casseroles to make it look like nothing more than a community celebration. But in my sewing room, I organized every piece of evidence into neat stacks: school awards, medical bills, photographs of Ethan and me across the years. Melissa and Ryan had turned gossip into their weapon. At the community hall, I would turn truth into mine. The first decisive move was made. The clock was ticking toward Saturday. And this time, I wouldn't be caught unprepared. Saturday came faster than I expected. The community hall smelled of coffee and baked pies, folding chairs lined in rows. Neighbors, cousins, church members drifted in, balancing paper plates and small talk. Melissa and Ryan arrived late, of course, sweeping in with smug smiles, dressed as if the evening were theirs to host. Melissa wrapped an arm around Ethan's shoulders, steering him toward the center like a trophy. Ryan slapped backs, whispering, "Glad we're finally putting things right." I stood near the podium, hands steady on a folder thick with papers. When the room quieted, I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight is about Ethan. Many of you know he earned a small scholarship at school. I wanted us to celebrate his hard work." Applause rippled through the room. Ethan shifted, nervous but proud. Melissa stepped forward, voice dripping sugar. "And of course, we're so proud too. After all, he gets his determination from his parents." A murmur passed. Some people clapped politely. My chest tightened. Before Melissa could continue, Mr. Thompson, Ethan's teacher, rose from his chair. "With respect, Mrs. Langley, I've never seen you at a school event. It's always been Dorothy here. Every meeting, every fundraiser. Ethan's dedication comes from her example." The room hushed. Eyes flicked between Melissa and me. I opened my folder. "Since there seems to be confusion, I'd like to be clear." I held up the guardianship order. "For 10 years, the court has recognized me as Ethan's legal guardian. These aren't just words, they are the law." Gasps, whispers. Ryan barked a laugh. "Temporary paperwork, Dorothy. Everyone knows blood comes first. We're his real parents." Before I could answer, Mrs. Carter stood from the back. "Real parents don't vanish for a decade. I heard with my own ears when you told Dorothy she was finished. You wanted to push her into a nursing home just so you could take credit for what she's done." Melissa's smile cracked, her voice sharpening. "That's not true." But the tide in the room had shifted. People leaned forward, listening. The weight of silence pressed. Then Ethan stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides. His voice trembled but carried. "Grandma raised me. She fed me, loved me, taught me everything. You don't get to walk in now and pretend you were here. You weren't." The words hung in the air like a hammer blow, and for the first time Melissa and Ryan looked less like victors and more like cornered frauds. The reveal had begun. Ryan's face reddened. He stepped forward, pointing a finger at me like a prosecutor. "Don't let her fool you. Dorothy's been using Ethan to prop up her lonely life. She's clung to him because she has nothing else. That's not parenting, that's selfishness." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some heads nodded uneasily. Melissa seized the moment. Her voice rose, sharp and rehearsed. "Do you all even know what she's put Ethan through? Last winter, she nearly wrecked the car on the way to school. He could have been killed. She's too old to keep him safe. We came back because we couldn't let it go on any longer." I felt heat rush to my face. That accident was nothing more than black ice on a February morning, and I had pulled us safely to the shoulder before anything happened. Melissa twisted it into negligence. "That's not true," I snapped. "Ethan was fine. We were both fine." Ryan cut in, loud and forceful. "She hides her weakness. She's frail, forgetful. Ask yourselves, do you really believe this woman can raise a teenage boy on her own?" The crowd rippled with uncertainty. My cousin muttered, "She has been alone a long time." I gripped Ethan's journal in my hand like a shield, but before I could speak, Mrs. Carter rose from her seat, voice steady. "I live across the street. I've seen Dorothy shovel her own walk, fix her own roof, and sit at every game Ethan played. If that's weakness, then we should all wish to be so weak." Her words drew a burst of applause. Melissa's smile faltered, but she pressed on, desperation creeping in. "You're all blinded by sentiment. She's old and she's clinging to a child who deserves better. He belongs with his parents, with us." And then Ethan's voice cut through, stronger than before. "You left me." He looked at Melissa, then Ryan. "You left me crying on Grandma's couch for 10 years. She didn't cling to me. I clung to her, and I'm not leaving her. Not now, not ever." The hall erupted in gasps. Some clapped. Others sat in stunned silence. Melissa tried to speak again, but the room was no longer hers. The momentum had shifted. I saw it in her eyes. Panic. She realized her grip on the story was slipping, but the fight was far from over. The tension in the hall was thick enough to choke on. Melissa tried to smile, but her voice cracked. Sweetheart, you don't mean that. You're confused. Grandma's filled your head with stories because she's afraid of being alone. Ethan didn't flinch. No, I remember who was there when I had nightmares, who stayed up when I was sick, who cheered at every game. It wasn't you. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "He's old enough to know the truth." Ryan barked a laugh, trying to regain control. Listen to the boy. He's been brainwashed. You'd think this old woman could raise him better than his own parents. Ridiculous. But in his rush, his voice grew sharp, bitter. He jabbed a finger at Ethan. "We left because we couldn't handle the burden. You were 5 years old and you were—" He stopped too late. The words hung heavy. We couldn't handle the burden. The room gasped. Melissa's face blanched. She hissed at him under her breath, but the damage was done. Mrs. B. Carter stood again, louder this time. "There it is, straight from his mouth. They didn't leave to build a better life. They left because they didn't want the responsibility." The crowd erupted, voices overlapping, some angry, some disgusted. Melissa tried to salvage it. "That's not what he meant." But Ethan seized the moment. He stepped toward the podium, standing tall. "You just admitted it. You left because you didn't want me. Don't you dare come back now and pretend otherwise." The hall fell silent, then a ripple of applause spread, growing louder, stronger. I saw it in their faces, neighbors, cousins, church members. The tide had turned. For the first time, Melissa and Ryan looked small, their power slipping like sand through their fingers. And for the first time, I felt the weight lift from my chest. The turning point had arrived. The hall quieted as I stepped to the podium, folder in hand. My voice was steady, each word landing like a stone. For 10 years, I've heard the whispers. Too old, too weak, just a babysitter. But here are the facts. I opened the folder and held up the guardianship papers. This document, signed by the court, gave me legal custody of Ethan when his parents walked away. Not for a month, not for a year, 10 full years. Every school form, every doctor's bill, every legal responsibility has my name on it. Melissa shook her head wildly. That was supposed to be temporary. I fixed her with a look sharp enough to silence her. Temporary doesn't last a decade. Then I held up Ethan's journal, pages worn from his small hands. And here's the truth no court can deny. Page after page of a boy's memories. His birthdays, his school projects, the nights he was sick, the games he played. Every one of them with me at his side. Not you. Gasps filled the room. I flipped the book open and read aloud. Grandma made me pancakes when I was sad. Grandma sat with me until the fever broke. Grandma told me stories about Grandpa. My throat caught, but I pressed on. You abandoned him. I raised him, and no one, no rumor, no lie can erase that. Ethan moved to my side, placing his hand over mine. His voice rang out, strong and clear. Grandma is my real parent. She's my family, and I'm staying with her. Applause thundered through the hall. People rose to their feet. Mrs. Carter clapped until tears streamed down her face. Ryan muttered curses under his breath, tugging at Melissa's arm. But the damage was done. Their masks had cracked in front of everyone who mattered. I closed the folder and looked them dead in the eye. You can keep your excuses, but you will not take away my dignity. You will not take my grandson. This ends tonight. The hall erupted again, voices united, drowning Melissa's protests. The truth had landed, the final blow struck, and in that moment, I knew I had won. In the weeks that followed, Melissa and Ryan faded from town as quickly as they had returned. The whispers stopped. The pitying looks were gone. Neighbors dropped by not to question, but to congratulate. Ethan and I settled back into our rhythm. Quiet dinners, his homework at the kitchen table, my sewing machine humming in the background. Only now, there was a new peace in our home. The shadow of being cast aside was gone. I was no longer just the grandmother who stepped in. I was the woman who stood up, fought back, and reclaimed her place, and I wasn't alone. Ethan stood with me. The town stood with me. I had my dignity, and I had my family. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Women 65 Plus USA because stories like mine deserve to be heard.